Hello, I'm Jane Bunnett. I would like to thank Gail Boyd and Alternative Jazz Venues for inviting me to the party. Yes, it's a party, and this is a terrific thing that Gail Boyd has set up. I've really enjoyed watching many of these. It's great. And of course, during the COVID time, this has been really a rough time for so many of we musicians that are so used to doing our art and playing with each other. And well, it's been a tough time for everyone. And people have asked me, like, over the last couple of years, what are you doing to keep engaged with, just your art? Well, I'm going to show you. I have been working on my steps. All right, I have to admit, it's Jimmy Slide, George Benson, and Joe Jones. But I'm still working on my steps. Anyhow, yeah, let's get real. So I put on Facebook. Whew, I'm out of breath. I put on Facebook. I'm going to have to explain myself. And my dear friend in Chicago, Lauren Deutsch, she said, you got some splaining to do. So that's what I'm going to do a bit today in the 30 minutes we have together. And I've had a very varied career, been very confusing to many people. Hasn't been confusing to me. I'm Canadian. I live in Toronto, Canada. And I guess that always seemed odd at the very beginning. Not so much now because the music, of course, is so international. But yes, it's been interesting always, not always, but a lot of the time when I resided in Canada, which is where I am now. I'm actually up in the north, 36 below zero a couple days ago, to view the New York scene through Canadian eyes. And it was interesting because I've always been able to, go to New York, or mostly New York, to, be around the music and the great artists there, and then to retreat back to my home and to work on my studies. It actually reminded me of something. I've had a great fortune to meet so many wonderful musicians, and I one of the things once Sir Roland Hanna, the great pianist, gave me a ride home actually after his gig, and I was pretty young and pretty itchy to get to New York, and he gave me some pretty good advice. He said, you know what, try and cultivate a name for yourself in your city before you uproot yourself and move somewhere. And that for me personally was very good advice. But anyway, we've always, we're so close to the US and such a part of course, the music scene. And also I have to mention all the great Canadians, the comedians that have come from Canada that are now based in the US, like Jim Carrey, Norm Macdonald, the late Norm Macdonald, Martin Short, John Candy, there's many. So we're very, very connected. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my early years, because people always wonder how you got started in music. I played clarinet in the school band. I wanted the flute. Music teacher said I had a good ear. He wanted me to play violin. I didn't want to play the violin. I really wanted a horn. And there was only 2 flutes, and so they were gone. And pretty much all the band instruments were gone. And he personally brought me his own clarinet, which is what I began to study on in grade 5. So I played that for about 4 years. He loaned me his clarinet, silver clarinet, and then off I went to private school in grade 9, and there was no music or any creative whatever. It was a prison. But anyhow, my parents bought our house when I was, I'm the youngest of three kids. My sister Sarah, who's 7 years older than me, and then my big brother Peter. And my parents bought our home because there was a piano in it, and my dad kind of grew up on a farm and he wanted a piano. So my sister started with the piano lesson, Sarah, and apparently she told me the story not too long ago, a few years ago, that she was working on a piece, and she was the one getting the piano lessons. She was working on a piece, and my mother yelled from the kitchen, "Hey, Sarah, that's so much better." And it was actually me playing the piano. So she was rather discouraged when my mother said that, and she quit. And so I began the piano lessons. So I did that for a number of years. And then in school, we had a lunch hour piano lesson on a cardboard keyboard. That was not very inviting, but you know, got me going. And anyway, I loved the band. I loved playing the clarinet in the school band. It was so much fun. And later we tried piano lessons, and that was a tough time. I was kind of rebellious and always being creative at the piano and couldn't stick to the music. So I stopped and started for many years. And finally, I got very serious when I was about 15, 16 about the piano. At that time, I'd gone to 4 high schools. I'd been kicked out of 2 of them. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of kid I was. And it was very creative and very energetic. But I had a piano teacher who was right around the corner and from me, and he was a very tough piano teacher. His name was Harry Heap, and he saw that I had potential, and he really, you know, worked hard with me. He only took about 10 students, and that was a great time. It was a very rebellious time too, because half the time I spent crying because he really, in the piano lessons, because he was very tough and very serious. And but that was a very formative time for me, working on music. Even at that time, strange enough, I really gravitated towards all the Latin tinge kind of pieces, if they were by Debussy or Ravel, or you know, anything that had that sort of thing underneath it. It was my favorite key, Mystera, Alberti Mystera. Anyway, what happened, I'm going to jump forward a bit, was I developed a tendonitis. At this point, I was at a free school. So this was like my 5th or 6th school. And I pretty much stopped going there, and I decided I just wanted to play the piano. And I would be about 17 years old now. And I got tendonitis, and it was suggested, instead of having it operated on, which was a possibility, that I go somewhere warm. And off I went to San Francisco, and this was the first lightning bolt for me, the very pivotal, because when I went to San Francisco, I saw that Charles Mingus was playing at Keystone Corner. Hello, Todd Barkin, if you're listening. I told Todd this story. And I had heard Mingus in Toronto. We had a club called the Colonial, so I was aware of Mingus. My big brother had a great record collection, Mingus, Monk, all kinds of music, Bob Dylan, everything. And I was always stealing his music. So I knew about Mingus. And so I went to the club one night, I went the second night, I went the third night. And when I came back from that trip, I went 5 nights in a row. When I came back from that trip, I had pretty much decided I wanted to play jazz. So I did quickly finish up my piano studies. I got my grade 10, and then I embarked on how could I play jazz. At that time, there was no universities. There was no jazz programs at that time. And luckily, I was able to, one time, always these accidents happen. I took a different way home, walking home from someplace, and there was a place called the New School of Music. And I was curious because I've always been and there was a curious about music. Excuse me, this thing's on. And I went in, and there were sort of younger people that were into jazz, and they were doing some workshops, and people were playing, and it was just like this little network. It's quite interesting, and so I found exactly what I was looking for, and I kind of enrolled in a couple of workshops there, and there I met a great friend named Marilyn Lerner, pianist who's still out playing, and we quickly, we started to play together, and very quickly we started to go out with a few tunes that we knew to see if we could get like little gigs at coffee shops and bistros, and just piano and then flute. At the time I was playing flute and this alto sax, I think. Not very well. And I also met Larry, my partner, and later became my husband. My 45 years we've been together. And from there, I just started to sort of hone my skills. I think the year after that, York University opened up a very tiny jazz department. I had auditioned the year before in the classical department to see if I could get in. And I didn't get in. I cried all the way through the audition. It was disastrous, as there was bagpipe players underneath the window as I was doing my audition, rehearsing, and I was totally thrown. Anyway, I didn't get in the program, but the following year, I did get into the jazz program. There was a question that just popped up there. I'll try and see it when it comes up again there, Gil. There is really great. See you live. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Anyhow, so from there, I got into the jazz program there. So this is about 1978, and it was a very small department. Actually, that's how I bought my soprano sax. I had an accident there. I fell, broke my ankle, and I bought a soprano sax, and $578. So anyway, quickly to move on, I started hanging out at record stores and asking people to play the music, and going more out to the jazz clubs. And this was just a really terrific time for me. Started to visit Cuba. 1982 was the first trip to Cuba. Let me see. Let's see, and I'm jumping ahead a bit. I guess I should go a tiny bit back. Because of being a pianist, I had a real love for the piano, and so Don Pullen was one of the people on my radar who I got a chance to work with later, which was amazing because Don was in that Mingus band, and he had said to me when I said to him later, that's why I decided to play jazz, because of that night in Keystone Corners, and he said, "Don't blame me for that," which is funny. But yes, I had a chance to work with some really great piano players. Paul Bley, who I did a film and a recording with. Stanley Cowell, who I did a record with Dewey Redman called Spirituals and Dedications. And of course, the whole piano lineage in Cuba, as through my visits, I've had a chance to really work with some amazing piano players. First with Hilario Duran, the late, great Frank Emilio, Guillermo Rubalcaba, who's Gonzalo's father, and also I worked with Gonzalo, David Morales, and Jose Murivitier, and Elio Villafranca, and now in Makeke, Dana Olano. But I'm going to go back to the artists that I loved, going back into the jazz. Always had two courses going with music, different paths, but they eventually, they both informed each other. And when I met Larry, he had an incredible record collection, and I started to, investigate all this music, hearing, of course, Coltrane before Charlie Parker. And as I continued to learn more and more about music, I got more informed. Larry and I started going down to Barry Harris's classes, the jazz workshop. That's in like 1977, 78. We take the bus down there for the weekend and go to the Vanguard. And that was another very profound moment when starting to prepare for our first jazz recording. Our first jazz recording called In Due Time. going to the Vanguard and sitting very close to Tony Williams' drums and realizing that everything comes with the rhythm, everything comes from the drummer, so important. So when planning that first recording, we looked at working with the people that were our musical heroes, and it seemed very adventuresome and outside of the box, but it was a great way to well, for my, how do I say it, to challenge myself, and invited Don Pullen to be on our first recording, and invited Dewey Redman to be on our first recording, and a wonderful drummer from Canada who we've lost track of. He disappeared, named Claude Roger from Quebec. So that was very exciting. Also, Vincent Chauncey, the producer, Serge Schlomovitz, he suggested Vincent Chauncey. And so Vincent Chauncey on French horn was on the recording. So this was just an incredible project and recording for us, and really sort of set the bar for me. And so lucky to have kept up those relationships, for many years. After that, did 3 more recordings with Dewey Redman and 4 recordings with Don Pullen, and a lot of touring with both of them. The last recording with Don Pullen being with Billy Hart, Sheila Jordan, and Gene Lee. So I've had a very eclectic career, and it's been really exciting. So I'm going to jump now to Cuba, which was like in 1982 was the first trip to Cuba, to go to Santiago. It's just a vacation. Hearing the music there the first night, there was an 18-piece band. Trumpet player Paisan Millet became one of our great friends. And went into Santiago the next day and met all these musicians. And 3 weeks later, headed to Havana with a notepad of all these musicians that we should meet. And that was another pivotal time. Mercedes Valdez, Guillermo Barreto, Bobby Carcases. I didn't meet Ilario at that time, but we started, to travel more and more to Cuba, going to Havana and learning about the music. Wow, this was just such a period of growth. At the same time, in Toronto, where we were living, we were hosting a lot of musicians. Barry Harris set up his first jazz workshop in Toronto at our home, and later we were hosting so many people. Like John Hicks would come, Clifford Jordan would come and hang out, Jimmy Nepper, flautist James Newton, Ira Sullivan would come, in the afternoons when he wasn't playing, like at night, he was hanging out and sessioning. Big Nick Liss. This was so many musicians that came to our place, and this for me was like university, because we were mixing up with these musicians and learning so much from them, and learning, about the spirit of the music. And I wouldn't trade that for anything right now. Slim Gaylord, did I mention Slim Gaylord? That was a wild time. He came and then continued to live with us off and on for about 4 years. Those were very wild times, so I could just talk for hours and hours about Slim. But I got some notes here. John Chakai, Abdullah Ibrahim. It was a beautiful time. So we started to, let me see. We did our first record in due time. And then I did a second record with Don Pullen called New York Duets, which was just the 2 of us. And that was, just beautiful experience. I loved Don Pullen. I'll miss him terribly. And then, let me see, we did, so then I did Live at Sweet Basil in New York City. And that was with Don Pullen and also with the great drummer, Billy Hart, Larry on trumpet, Kieran Overs. So now we're jumping into the Cuban thing, the first recordings in Cuba. So I have got those 3 records under my belt. And from there, we all the time, we're planning what we're going to do with our Cuba, with our visits with Cuba. We're learning more and more about the music all the time. And I had my little cassette, and I was going out and doing my own field recordings. Mercedes was introducing us to, some of the greats. One of them was the group Ruben Dabo, who she started working with. So we worked on this very hard for about 3 years, and finally the time came, 1990, we were going to make a record in Cuba, but there was so much red tape to go through. Number one, Ruben Dabo, they were dock workers, so they weren't registered to go into studio, the Ingreb studio, which is the former RCA studio. We were foreigners, Larry and I, and we weren't allowed to go in the studio, but we finally, through the help of Guillermo Barreto and Mercedes, were able to break that, and we got in there. Everything was ready to go with the recording, everything booked. And then the CBC, it was a label, CBC, I'm trying to think of the Variety, I think it was called. I found out by just happenstance, they canceled it, and everything was set up. And I was very, very upset. This had been 3 years in organizing. And what happened then was I went to the CBC. Those days you could walk into a place like that, a big corporation, and I demanded to have a meeting with the president there for that. And I got the project back on. My feeling was I had nothing to lose, and by doing that, and everything to gain, because I had sort of felt I could never show my face back with these people, my great friends in Cuba, saying that it was off after everyone's hard work. So that record became a real breakthrough record for us. In Canada, it was kind of slow, but in Europe, the crazy thing, at the same time, I received a Canada Council grant to study with the great saxophonist, soprano player Steve Lacy. So I also went off to Paris while this is all happening to study for a year. And I ended up staying 4 years in Paris, living there, and started to do some work, because partly the record, Spirits of Havana, really got very well received there in Europe. And because of that recording, we then established our group, Spirits of Havana. And many great musicians came through Spirits of Havana. That was a smaller ensemble. But we, many people like Hilario Duran, Pedrito Martinez, Daphne Piretto, Elia Villafranca, David Varese, they all came through in the 90s in our group Spirits of Havana. And yeah, so that was a beautiful time, and opened the doors to many more recordings that we did in Cuba. Since then, we did Havana Flute Summit with Maraca and Richard Egways, Cuban Piano Masters with Frank Emilio and Jose Maria Vitier, Chamalongo, which was all-star rumberos, Alma de Santiago, which was a focus on the region of Santiago de Cuba, and Radio Guantanamo, which was done in Guantanamo, focusing on the Changui music, and then later Embracing Voices, which was with Grupo Vocal Descendant from Camagüey. Also at this time, running back to year 2000, we did a documentary film with the NFB, which was called Spirits of Havana too. That was kind of a music travelogue, and it was the first time it focused in Havana, but then it had us leaving Havana and going to do musical activity in Matanzas, and then in Cienfuegos and Camagüey, so traveling the whole country. That was a spectacular thing, and that influenced the many recordings that we continued to make in Cuba. So at this point, I had been always the only woman in these situations with mostly men, and it came upon us that I had been doing a lot of work in the conservatories with the students, and Um, and meeting a lot of women that were playing, but then I would never see them out on the scene, especially jazz festival time. They weren't playing. Luckily it's changed, but not then. So in 2013, it seemed the time was right. I met Daimi Erosena at the Jazz Festival and returned to Toronto. And shortly after that, brought Daimi to Toronto and then started to think of this idea to do a all-female ensemble, Cuban. And so that's when Mikeke was born. Jane Bunnett and Mikeke. That was in the year 2014. So we have been going, since then. And we have our first record is called Mikeke, which won a Juno in Canada in the year 2015. And then shortly after that, we made Odara, which received a Grammy nomination. And our third recording then is called On Firm Ground, which is what we have been touring with. Maybe Gail, you could put some, if the chance is to put some dates up, because we're going to be doing some touring very, very soon. And I'm working our new material for our what will be our fourth recording. And that fourth recording will be was supposed to be done in Chicago at the Jazz Showcase, but because of all the craziness with the COVID and stuff and what was going on, it got canceled. But anyhow, we just returned from the US, and we were in Europe October and in November. I think it might have been, we jumped into those dates a little too soon. It was pretty rough with the visas, with the PCR tests, just all the, just the stress, canceled flights, it goes on and on and on. But anyhow, we are supposed to be coming to your neck of the woods starting in February, and also March and May. There are dates. So hopefully you might see them on this. If not, you can go to our website. And I hope I've explained myself. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to have met some incredible people. The way I've gone about learning the music has been pretty much firsthand with all these musicians. When I was starting out, if Frank West was in Toronto playing, I'd ask if I could come and if we could get together and could he give me a lesson. And same with James Moody and Clifford Jordan, and all these musicians have really informed and inspired me to pursue the music. And as Dewey said, Dewey Redman, you take care of the music will take care of you. And especially during this time, we're trying to keep our spirits up with the music. So all these, I guess I have about 25 recordings out, maybe more. Yes, that's what Dewey said. He said a whole bunch of other stuff, but some of those stuff I can't say, but that one I can. And I just want to thank Gail once again, and Alternative Jazz for giving me this opportunity to explain myself and all the course and path that I've taken. That's been a lot of fun. It's been a very special time. Hi, Peter. Here's a good friend of ours. He ran the Mount Vernon Country Club. Yes, indeed. He remembers Gail. Hey, and Peter, he remembers you, Gail. And thank you, Lauren. I see Lauren Deutsch, a wonderful photographer there. So all these love from Detroit. Hey, thank you, Dennis. All the best, Dennis. Hey, everybody's, phew. Hi there, Lauren. We got to do that photo. I hope we can do that photo when we get to Chicago. Oh my goodness. Rusty. Love you, Rusty. I hope I see you soon, Rusty. Rusty Assen. Yes. Oh my goodness. There's all these people. Hi, Jay. So hard to read these because I don't have my glass. Jazz Judy. Jazz Judy. Hey. How are you, Judy Balos? Love you. I hope you're well. Wow. This is so nice. I'm up here in the woods. It is cold. I wish I could show you what it looks like here, folks. The lake is all full of ice. I've given up ice skating, but anyhow, I guess I'm supposed to sign off now. Gail, you better put up that flag and tell me to get off. But anyway, I hope to see in the next few months to see you out there. McKechnie will be out there. And yeah, February 4th, we're at the university in Urbana, University of Chicago. So we will be there. And later dates at the end of February, and go to our website and send me a Facebook message. And thank you, Gail, for the forum of this. And lots of love to everybody in 2022.